Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be quick here. I know there's a lot of other members who want to get in, so I'll just direct my questions actually to Dr. Carter. And the focus of my questions is, if you were able to get some certainty, I want to know how much that would help. Now, obviously, you know, there are concerns about any further cuts in the discretionary budget. There are many folks in this panel who think that there shouldn't be any further. Personally, I think there probably is room for some further cuts. But the big problem is that, you know, you have had 2 years now with the CR, with the debt ceiling threat of government shutdown. CR doesn't enable you to fund the right programs. So let's say hypothetically, you know, we were to take a 10-year number and say, you know, we'd ask for another $175 billion cut from defense, but you could do it pretty much wherever you want. We do it through a normal appropriations process. But right now, today, we said that's the number. We're going to give you an appropriations bill. We're going to kill sequestration. We're going to raise the debt ceiling. We're basically going to take that uncertainty off the table and let you budget going forward for 10 years with $175 billion more that you need to cut. How much of everything that we've heard here would that help solve? And I'll throw one other little curveball in there, something we haven't mentioned today. There are cuts that DOD has proposed that Congress has legislatively prohibited you from doing. I think the most dramatic of these was the cruisers that we wanted to decommission that you now have to keep, but you also don't have the money to operate. How much of that also throws into that problem? You could just touch on those 2 points. That's all I'll have.
I do feel obligated. I feel like I'd like to respond as well, Congressman. Clearly, budget certainty, time, and flexibility help. But there is a magnitude issue here, too. We built a strategy last year that we said we could execute and absorb $487 billion. I can't sit here today and guarantee you that if you take another 175, that strategy remains solvent. And if you're wondering why this is so hard, let me just use the Army. You know, people say, well, hell, you did it after World War II, you did it after Vietnam. After World War II, we went from a 1,000,000-man Army to 781,000. After Vietnam, actually, 781. We went in the 90s. We went from 781 to 495. We grew it for Desert Storm, for OEF and OIF to 570. It's on the way to 490 because of the Budget Control Act. The question I would ask this committee: what do you want your military to do? If you want it to be doing what it's doing today, then we can't give you another dollar. If you want us to do something less than that, we're all there with you, and we'll figure it out.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. I yield
Thank
back.
you, Mr. Thornberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just have to observe that I think in the 51 years we've had a defense authorization bill, I don't think we've ever swallowed any president's proposal whole without making some adjustments. But of course, what we're talking about today is on a different scale, as General Dempsey was just describing. General Odierno, in November 2011, we had a hearing in this room on sequestration, and you testified that if we go beyond that, talking about the 487, it becomes critical, and it becomes a fact that we will no longer modernize. We will no longer be able to respond to a variety of threats. General Dempsey just said another dollar beyond the cuts that y'all have already planned for changes the strategy, and it sounds to me like your testimony says if we go beyond that, we cannot respond to those threats. Is that still your testimony today?
What I said was in the context of what we are required to do. So I want to make that clear. So back in 2011, that was in the context of what you're asking the Army to do. We would not be able to do that. I think it's very much in line with what General Dempsey would say. I would just throw out one other point. Is with the Army, it's about force structure. So you got to balance force structure, readiness, modernization. You know, for us to move forward, any significant cuts is a further reduction in our force structure.
Yeah.
And what I would just tell everybody here, we haven't even started our reductions yet based on the $487 billion cut. That will start in 2014. Everything we've done so far has been overseas. That now starts in the continental, in the 50 United States in 2014. And it's going to be dramatic. And I just want everybody to be braced for that. That has nothing to do with sequestration. If sequestration goes into effect, that doubles. And we haven't even started the reductions yet. And that has a significant impact on readiness and our ability to respond in itself.
Okay. General Amos, at the same hearing, you testified that so if you go beyond that amount, $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion, it's going to come down in force structure, and it will mean capabilities and ability to respond. And is that still your position today, that beyond what you have already had to deal with, this 487, further cuts, as you said, $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion, it comes down to force structure and our ability to respond?
It certainly does, sir. I absolutely agree with that today. The landscape has changed a bit. Just even the very matter of resetting the force that's currently in Afghanistan, all the gear that we've had, we still have that bill, and it continues to slide. So not only will we have less capability because reset is now in competition with modernization, which is in competition with O&M, which is in competition with readiness, and finally in competition with personnel costs. All of it fits in the alchemy. So yes, what will have to happen is our capacity, the total volume, the ability to be able to do the things that our nation expects its Marine Corps to do will be reduced.
Good. General Welch, you weren't here at that hearing, but your predecessor testified that we are confident that further spending reductions beyond the Budget Control Act's first round of cuts cannot be done without substantially altering our core military capabilities and therefore our national security. Do you agree with that?
I do, Congressman. We are already in a position in the Air Force of trading modernization for readiness. You saw it in the decision on the C-27 last year and our recommendation on the Global Hawk Block 30. We didn't want to get rid of those platforms because we wanted to get rid of the platforms. It's because we couldn't afford to keep doing everything we were doing. So we are trading new capability in a Global Hawk Block 30 to improve our readiness numbers for the remainder of the Air Force. I absolutely agree with General Schwartz's comments.
Yeah. Well, let me just observe that the President's answer to sequestration has been more cuts in defense, at least as part of what he calls a balanced approach. And I hope each of y'all are describing these consequences to him, because further cuts beyond the Budget Control Act are going to move us in the direction that you've all warned about here today. One other observation during my last 20 seconds. The House has acted twice last year to substitute sequestration cuts or other targeted cuts for sequestration cuts. The chairman's introduced a bill to prevent sequestration by federal attrition. I introduced a bill to stop sequestration just by delaying further implementation of the Health Care Act. There's other ideas that members have. To quote the President, we can do this. We just have to want to.
All I need is a yes or a no for the record. We've already cut billions under Secretary Gates that many people have forgotten about. The 487 billion that we've talked about but are just coming into play that are massive cuts. If you were asked to support an additional cut of $250 billion, could you do so given current missions? Yes or no? General?
Not and execute the current strategy. I'd have to know the change to the strategy and the increased risk.
Given current missions, the answer is no.
No.
General?
No. No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Nor could I. Thank you very much. Your service is greatly appreciated. Your patience here today has been greatly appreciated. Your answers have been very, very helpful. This committee stands adjourned.